black belts called little girl weak in training, so she took them down in seconds. When a group of arrogant black belts sneered at Ava Kessler, a quiet, unassuming girl training in their dojo, they thought they were dealing with just another inexperienced student. They saw weakness where there was strength, and silence where there was resolve. What started as a dismissive challenge soon turned into a powerful lesson in humility and respect. In just seconds, Ava would reveal a legacy forged in sacrifice and discipline, a legacy that would silence the doubters, shatter assumptions, and redefine what it means to be strong. This is the story of how one girl's quiet strength took down a room full of black belts, teaching everyone that true power is often hidden beneath the surface. Just a quick little pause before I forget. If you like this kind of stories of overcoming adversity and justice, please leave a like and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to our channel so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. I guarantee you won't want to miss it. Now let's jump in. The mat smelled like sweat and old vinyl. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, casting a sterile glow over the training hall. A dozen black belts stood in a loose circle, laughing quietly, testing stretches, shadowboxing with lazy precision. They didn't notice the girl at first. She stood near the back wall. Small frame, shoulders drawn. Maybe 10, maybe 11. Her GI was too big, sleeves bunched around her wrists, pants cuffed twice. No patches, no name tag, just white belt. Untied hair tucked behind her ears. Quiet. Coach Ortega scratched his beard and glanced at the clipboard. "Ava?" he called out, almost uncertain. "Ava Kessler?" The girl raised one hand. "That's you?" he asked, blinking. "You're here for advanced training?" She nodded once. Behind him, one of the older students, a tall teen with a brown belt and too much attitude, chuckled. "She in the wrong class?" Another whispered, not even trying to hide it. "She looks like she wandered in from ballet." The coach hesitated, then shrugged. "Well, everyone's got to start somewhere. Just watch and follow along." She bowed, softly, and stepped barefoot onto the mat. The moment her feet touched the padded surface, her posture changed, just slightly. Chin lifted, eyes still down, but not timid. Just watching, breathing slow, intentional. But the circle of black belts didn't see it. They barely looked. They went back to their drills. Advanced footwork, takedown sequences, pressure control. The kind of training meant for national competitions, not small girls with sleeves too long for their arms. Ava didn't complain. She didn't ask for help. She simply mirrored every motion, every shift in balance, with eerie precision. Still, when she landed a clean reversal during a drill with a disinterested partner, he shook his head and scoffed. "That wasn't right," he muttered, more to his pride than to her. She said nothing, just bowed, reset, waited. From the far wall, one of the assistant instructors, Coach Lin, a woman in her late 30s with sharp eyes, watched quietly. Something about the way the girl reset her footing, the way she moved without hesitation, without flair. It was familiar, but Lin said nothing. Not yet. The rest of the room carried on like the girl didn't matter. They wouldn't ignore her for long. Coach Ortega blew his whistle. "Pair up. Light sparring, 50% power. Work your flow, not your ego." The black belts moved with lazy confidence, matching with old partners, cracking knuckles, smirking. Most had trained together for years. State titles, regional medals. Some coach part-time. All of them knew each other. Ava stood alone. "Someone pair with the new kid," Ortega called over his shoulder. "Let her feel out the rhythm." No one moved. Coach Lin stepped forward, about to intervene, but a cocky voice rang out from the left. "I got her," said Mason, the tallest of the bunch. Black belt, 17. Full of sarcasm. He was the one who'd laughed first. "Sure you can handle it?" a friend joked. He grinned. "I'll go easy. Don't want to break her." The room chuckled. Ava didn't flinch. She bowed respectfully to Mason. He returned a sloppy one. "Okay, ballerina," he said with a smirk. "Try not to cry." Coach Ortega blew the whistle again. Mason lunged. A fast jab. Lazy. More for show than form. A tester. Ava slid back, not with panic, but with the quiet, practiced grace of someone who had done this 1,000 times in silence. Her back foot pivoted. Her frame dropped half an inch. Eyes stayed locked on his chest, not his hands. Mason threw a second jab, then a quick low kick. She didn't block. She adjusted. Subtly. slipping through space like a leaf in wind. The crowd was still laughing. Come on, she's scared. She doesn't even know how to stand. Bet she's gonna run crying to mom. Coach Lin didn't laugh. Her arms were crossed. Her jaw clenched. Ava moved again, this time faintly circling. No wasted energy. No showmanship. Just angles. Precision. Mason got impatient. All right, enough dancing, he muttered. He stepped in fast, faster than before. A hook into a sweep attempt. Forceful. Overkill. But just as his leg rose, Ava's dropped. Her pivot was surgical. His balance slipped. And for one single instant, the rhythm of the room broke. He stumbled, not down, but offline. Embarrassed. And the quietest girl in the gym simply waited. Reset. Bowed again. He narrowed his eyes. This time, he wouldn't hold back. But even then, she didn't look afraid. She looked ready. Training resumed. Partners rotated. Mason stalked back toward his friends, muttering something under his breath. Kid's lucky, he said. I slipped. No one questioned it. They were too used to hearing Mason explain away close calls. Ava returned to the edge of the mat, quietly waiting for her next turn. She adjusted the sleeve of her GI. The stitching was faded, but there was something barely visible near the cuff. Initials, hand-sewn in dark thread, MK. Coach Lin noticed. Her brow furrowed. She leaned in toward Ortega. Did she say her last name was Kessler? Ortega nodded, distracted, correcting a grip on the far side of the mat. Yeah, Ava Kessler. What? Lin's voice dropped low. You ever meet Marcus Kessler? Ortega paused. Looked over. No, he said. Only heard stories. Lin nodded once. Slowly. I trained under him. For 6 months. Before he disappeared. Ortega blinked. You think this girl? I don't know. But the way she moved, and that stitch on her sleeve. Lin didn't finish the sentence. On the mat, Ava was up again. This time paired with Liana, 15, second-degree black belt, sharp and confident, but respectful. Liana didn't laugh. She bowed properly. She didn't underestimate, but she didn't expect much, either. They began slowly. A feeling-out rhythm. Ava's posture shifted, barely noticeable unless you knew what to look for. She lowered her center of gravity, just enough. Her feet moved with short, deliberate glides, always returning to neutral. The kind of movement no beginner had. Liana raised an eyebrow mid-spar. You've done this before, she murmured. Ava said nothing, just kept moving. Quiet. Focused. And then she performed a redirection that left Liana off balance, blinking. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't hard. But it was perfect. Liana stepped back, studied her. Coach Lin stepped forward, now fully watching. She's not new, she whispered to herself. She's trained. Not trained recently. Not in this gym. Not at this pace. Trained somewhere harder. Quieter. Ava took a knee beside the wall when the round ended. She reached into her gym bag and pulled out a worn cloth to wipe her face. Alongside it, something else peeked out. Notebooks. A photo, black and white, folded, creased. It showed a man in uniform, kneeling next to a younger version of her, both in matching GIs. His face was calm, strong, weathered. His belt was black. His hand rested gently on her shoulder. Lin recognized the man immediately. Marcus Kessler, her mentor, a legend. Coach Lin didn't speak for a long while. She just watched. Watched the way Ava folded her towel. The way she sat, back straight, hands resting over her knees. Not in exhaustion, but composure. That kind of posture wasn't taught in junior classes. It came from years. From legacy. Marcus Kessler. Call sign Whisper. A name spoken rarely, and only in hushed tones around the old self-defense and tactical circles. He was a myth to most, a martial arts prodigy turned combat instructor. Then gone, after a classified op overseas. Never sought spotlight. Never sought anything, really, except precision, protection, and silence. No one had seen him in almost a decade. But now here was this girl, and her every movement was echoing the old man's discipline. Lin crouched nearby, close enough for Ava to hear, but far enough to offer space. That was a nice shoulder redirect, she said quietly. Ava glanced up, unsure whether it was praise or a test. I used to see that one used by a man who trained in the cold, with his fingers wrapped in cloth because they never healed right. Lin added, her voice steady. You move like he did. Ava looked down, touched the edge of the photo sticking out of her bag. He was my dad, she said. Barely a whisper. Lin exhaled slowly, as if a puzzle had clicked into place. I thought so. A moment passed between them. Then Ava added, softly, I wasn't supposed to be here. He told me not to compete. Not like this. Lynn nodded. Why now? Ava's eyes didn't lift, but something behind them shifted. He's gone, she said. Just that. Lynn didn't ask more. Didn't need to. The weight in Ava's voice told the rest. Gone. Whether in service or sickness or quiet retreat, Marcus Kessler had passed. And his daughter, his legacy, had walked into a gym full of strangers, wearing an untied belt and an oversized GI, to prove something. Maybe not to them. Maybe not even to herself. But to him. Lynn stood, straightened her back. They won't see it yet, she said gently. But they will. Ava finally looked up, eyes focused. No tears. Just that same stillness. That same unshakable core. Across the mat, the black belts laughed again. Louder now, confident that they still ruled the room. Lynn turned toward them, and knew they wouldn't laugh for long. It was time for line drills. Coach Ortega clapped twice, pulling the group into formation. Let's see speed, control, and respect. Senior belts first. Ava, you'll stay at the end. She didn't react, just nodded and moved to the far corner, alone. The others lined up. Mason, Liana, the rest, sharp GIs, flashy footwork, practiced presence. Their strikes were crisp, loud, meant to impress. There were high fives between reps, quick banter, whispers about weekend plans. But Ava moved differently. Not louder, not flashier, just sharper. She didn't perform, she executed. Each movement was quiet, efficient, exact. A step forward, a clean reverse punch, a pivot on the heel, perfect alignment from head to toe. No wasted motion, no flair. And yet, no one applauded. Speed it up, new kid, someone called from the line. It was Jace, another black belt, older than Mason, known for his arrogance and chest-out presence. You're gonna put the whole room to sleep. Another added, she still thinks she's in warm-up. This is senior drill. A few more snickers followed. Coach Ortega didn't correct them. Not yet. He was watching Ava, puzzled, uncertain. There was something about her that made him uneasy. Not fear, just discomfort. Like looking at a mirror you hadn't cleaned in years, and seeing a sharper reflection than you expected. Then came the challenge. Partner drills, Ortega barked. Flow sparring. No impact. Control over power. Rotate after each cycle. As before, the group broke into pairs, without a glance toward Ava. Lynn narrowed her eyes. She could see it coming. Mason turned and gestured to Jace. Why don't we tag team the new girl? He said loud enough for everyone to hear. Maybe she'll learn something. Jace grinned. Sure. Give her some real experience. Coach Ortega was about to speak, but paused. Lynn took a step forward. Let her decide. All eyes turned to Ava. She said nothing, just stepped forward, bowed politely to them both, and took position. Her face betrayed nothing, but her hands, open, relaxed, hung with the quiet readiness of someone who didn't need to prove anything, until someone forced her to. Jace looked over at Mason, chuckling. I'll start slow. You take over when she starts crying. Mason smirked. Deal. The circle formed around them. Not for learning now, but for spectacle. They had no idea what they were about to witness. The gym quieted, not in reverence, but in anticipation. Ava stood in the center of the mat, barefoot, still, expression unreadable. Her belt, still loosely tied, hung off-center. Her sleeves wrinkled. Nothing about her looked threatening. Jace stepped forward, tall and built like a linebacker. He cracked his neck, bounced on the balls of his feet. Ready? He asked, mockingly soft. Ava bowed, calm and precise. Begin. Coach Ortega called out. Jace didn't hesitate. He launched a standard front kick, fast enough to startle, not enough to land. A test. Ava didn't move. She didn't flinch. Her eyes tracked the kick, but her frame held steady. Her body absorbed the moment like a calm tide meeting a wave. Jace tried again. A palm strike, aimed at her shoulder. Still no contact, just pressure. Ava turned her body slightly, redirecting the space instead of the strike. Her right foot pivoted. Her left dropped half an inch. Minimal motion. Maximal control. Jace blinked. Okay, he muttered. Now he lunged in for real. His hand reached to feint, then sweep her stance. Ava's frame dipped, not backward, but under. She shifted through him, slipped around his weight. His foot landed where she had been. She was already behind him. He stumbled forward. The circle chuckled nervously. Careful, Jace, someone muttered. You almost got beat by a girl half your size. He scowled, stood upright again, and reset. This time, there was no play. Jace moved fast, launching a forward elbow into a sweeping grab, trying to catch her in a control lock. Ava moved, but it wasn't defensive. It was decisive. Her left hand wrapped his wrist mid-motion. Her right elbow rotated under his center. Her weight dropped as her back foot pivoted, and suddenly, Jace's balance was gone. He didn't fall hard, just enough to break rhythm. But he was on the mat, and she was standing over him, silent, breathing even. The circle went quiet. For just a moment. Then Mason stepped in. My turn. He didn't wait for a whistle. He lunged forward. But Ava was already moving. Preemptive, surgical, unreadable. She didn't hit. She guided. His arm was redirected. His foot caught. A moment later, Mason was mid-fall and caught himself, barely, hands slapping the mat to avoid a full takedown. 2 black belts. 2 missteps. 1 silent girl. The gym wasn't laughing anymore. They were watching. The energy in the room had shifted. What began as entertainment, a joke at a white belt's expense, was now something else. Something quieter. Heavier. The kind of silence that creeps in when the truth starts to edge its way to the surface. Ava stepped back to her line position without a word. She didn't smile. Didn't glance at the boys she'd just dropped. She bowed to them, same as before, then turned to face forward again. Jace sat on the edge of the mat, rubbing his forearm. She's just lucky, he muttered. Mason didn't speak. His jaw clenched, eyes locked on Ava. Not with anger, but confusion. That wasn't beginner luck. That was drilled reflex. High-level control. Years of it. Coach Ortega scratched the back of his head. All right, break for water. Students scattered toward their bottles and bags, whispers already floating between them. You saw how fast she moved? That wasn't normal. She didn't even try to hurt them. Just redirected. Maybe she's not a white belt. No, I saw her sign in. Name's Kessler. Lynn, standing near the back, overheard the last one. She turned her gaze toward Ava, who was now crouched by her bag, drinking from a worn metal flask. It wasn't decorated. No brand. Just utilitarian. Like something military. A black carabiner hung from the side of her gym bag. Attached to it, partially tucked beneath a cloth wrap, was a patch. Olive drab. Faded. Barely visible, but Lynn recognized the symbol. It wasn't from a sports academy. It was military. Special Operations Unit insignia. Definitely not something a kid would carry unless it meant something. Unless it was handed down. Coach Ortega approached Lynn. Do you know her? He asked, voice low. Lynn nodded slowly. Not her. Her father. Marcus. Yes. You think she's? I don't think, Lynn said softly. I know. She moves like him. Her center of gravity, her strike windows, even the way she re-centers her weight. It's all Kessler. But cleaner. Ortega blinked. Cleaner. Lynn's eyes didn't leave Ava. He taught her longer than anyone knows. On the mat, Ava stood again. She wasn't waiting for attention, but attention had found her. A few of the younger belts now watched her differently, confused, respectful, curious. And Mason, he wasn't smirking anymore. He was pacing, trying to decide if what had happened was a fluke. He needed to find out. Coach Ortega blew the whistle again. Back to rotation. Last round of partner drills, free movement, light contact allowed. Controlled strikes only. No showboating. But all eyes were already on Ava. She hadn't asked for it, hadn't demanded it. And yet, she had become the center of gravity in the room, pulling the focus of black belts, coaches, and bystanders alike without ever raising her voice. This time, no one hesitated to pair with her. They just didn't dare. Coach Ortega turned. Ava, partner with Mason again. Mason nodded before she could. This wasn't about proving himself anymore. It was about understanding what he missed. They bowed. No talking. No smirking. Just breath and movement. Coach Lynn stepped closer to the edge of the mat. So did Ortega. And the rest of the gym subtly began to circle inward. Mason took a slow stance this time. More cautious. Centered. Guard higher. He didn't charge. He waited. Ava moved first. Not aggressively. Just forward. Half a step. Then another. Mason mirrored her. She circled left. He followed. And then she shifted her weight so subtly that Mason missed it entirely, until his front foot overcommit and her body slipped into his space. Her right hand brushed his shoulder. Her left elbow rotated. Mason reacted too late. He spun, but Ava wasn't where she'd been. She was behind him again. No strike. No contact. Just perfect placement. He turned, breath sharp. The room held its collective inhale. Then he attacked. A right jab. Ava parried. A low kick. Ava absorbed and pivoted. A sudden feint into a rising elbow. Ava ducked, not in retreat, but in anticipation, and her heel clipped around Mason's lead leg, not sweeping, but settling his center downward. He didn't fall. He stopped. Frozen. Because she had let him stop. She could have taken him down again. Everyone saw it. And for the first time, Mason bowed, deeply. Ava returned the bow, unwavering. It was a quiet exchange, but the shift in the room was unmistakable. They weren't sparring anymore. They were learning. Even Ortega saw it now. The white belt had nothing to prove. She already knew who she was. The others were just catching up. And something deep in Mason's chest shifted, not humiliation, but respect. Earned. Later, while the others practiced kata across the room, Ava sat cross-legged against the far wall, eyes closed. To the casual eye, she looked like a child resting between rounds. But inside her stillness, another world stirred. A memory. Not loud, not vivid, but present, like a low hum beneath her breath. It was the sound of his voice. Her father's voice. Again, lower your center. Don't chase the body. Read the rhythm. She remembered the backyard. Cracked concrete. Faded chalk outlines marking stances. The sun always too bright, the mornings too early. His calloused hands gently adjusting her shoulders. Never harsh. Never loud. He taught her without ever raising his voice. Instead, he made silence her teacher. Made repetition her language. Every lesson tucked into the creases of daily life. A morning warm-up disguised as a game. A kata hidden in the pattern of folding laundry. Shadowboxing while waiting for water to boil. And always, always, the phrase he'd end with. Don't show them until you must. Let them underestimate you. That's where the power lives. She'd hated that, as a child. She'd wanted to be seen. But now it made sense. Because today, in this gym full of belts and accolades, her father's lessons had spoken louder than words ever could. The flashback sharpened. One specific day, 2 years ago. She was 9. They were training at dawn. He wasn't well. She could see it in his face. Paler than usual. Breath shorter. But he moved anyway. Taught anyway. He pulled a thin, olive patch from his old gear bag, the same one she now carried, and stitched it into the inside lining of her GI. This doesn't make you strong, he said, but it reminds you who you are. She had asked, who am I? His hand rested gently on her shoulder, just like in the photo. The quiet in the room that everyone hears last. Now, back in the gym, she opened her eyes. Her hands remained still, but her breath had deepened. Lynn stood nearby, watching, silent, respectful. Ava met her gaze. No words passed between them, but Lynn saw it. Not just the skill, not just the legacy, the loss, woven quietly into every movement. And the weight of someone carrying not just a father's training, but his silence. The gym's dull hum faded into the background, a muted soundtrack to the storm inside Ava's mind. She sat quietly by the far wall, the worn black and white photo tucked carefully back into her bag. The edges were soft and frayed, like the memories it held. But it wasn't just the photo that pressed on her heart. It was the weight of everything that photo symbolized. Another memory surfaced, one colder, heavier, and filled with silence. She was 12 years old, the first time she truly understood loss. Her father, Marcus Kessler, had returned from his deployment months earlier, but the man who walked through their front door wasn't the same one who'd left. His eyes held shadows. His laughter was rare, his presence distant. One evening, after an uneasy quiet stretched between them, Marcus called her to the kitchen table. The house was dimly lit, only the faint glow of a single lamp breaking the darkness. He looked worn, his shoulders hunched, his hands trembling slightly as they rested on the table. There are things you don't know, he said softly, voice low but steady. Things I had to do, people I lost. Things I couldn't talk about. She listened, wide-eyed and silent. From his worn backpack, he pulled out a small, battered journal, its leather cover cracked, pages yellowed. Inside were scrawled notes, tactical diagrams, and coded entries she didn't understand then but would come to recognize as the language of sacrifice and survival. Someday, You'll need this, he said, pressing the journal gently into her hands. Not to fight others, but to fight yourself. She looked up, confusion mingling with something she couldn't name. Why are you telling me this now? He hesitated, the weight of unspoken burdens filling the space between them. Because you're going to need to be stronger than I ever was. Stronger and quieter. Those words echoed inside her like a whispered command. Months later, Marcus disappeared again. No goodbyes, no explanations. Only silence. That silence burrowed deep into Ava's bones. It became the armor she wore beneath her oversized GI. Every smirk from the black belts, every whispered insult, every doubt cast her way was another layer of weight she carried. But it wasn't a weight that crushed her. It was the mantle she accepted. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the man who had taught her the power of silence, resilience, and patience. Lynn knelt beside her quietly, a subtle understanding in her eyes. You carry a legacy few understand, she said softly, voice steady. And soon they will. Ava stood, steady and resolute, folding the photo back into her bag. The room was watching now. The moment had come. The atmosphere in the gym had shifted palpably. What once was a casual training session now felt like the quiet eye of a storm. Everyone waiting, watching, barely breathing. The laughter and snickers had faded, replaced by a heavy silence loaded with unspoken tension. Mason stood near the edge of the mat, wiping sweat from his brow. His cocky grin was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped focus and a simmering frustration. His pride, bruised from the previous rounds, demanded a response, a chance to reclaim the dominance he'd taken for granted. He paced slowly, eyes darting toward Ava with a complex mix of curiosity and unease. This wasn't some white belt who had stumbled into the wrong class. This was something else entirely. Something he didn't understand yet, but could feel lurking beneath her quiet exterior. Coach Ortega cleared his throat to command attention. All right, enough light sparring, he announced, voice steady but firm. Let's see some real control and discipline. He scanned the group, then his gaze settled on Mason. You're up. Mason's jaw clenched as he squared his shoulders. No mercy this time, he muttered, stepping forward with deliberate intent. The black belts exchanged knowing glances. Whispers circulated among them. She's holding her own. It's not luck anymore. There's something about her. Lynn stood silently, arms crossed, watching with a keen eye, her expression unreadable but attentive. Mason approached Ava once more, this time shedding the arrogance of before. His movements were measured and precise, testing her limits. He feinted left, jabbed right, probing for weaknesses. Ava's eyes fixed calmly on his chest, tracking every subtle shift in muscle and breath, the rhythm of an experienced fighter. Increasing the pace, Mason launched a sharp combination, jab, cross, low kick. Each strike meant to challenge, to break the calm she maintained. But Ava absorbed the blows like an immovable wall, shifting her weight expertly to neutralize impact, her hands moving with gentle but unyielding guidance, redirecting force rather than meeting it head-on. Then, with a quiet precision that stunned everyone, she executed her counter. A swift sweep that toppled Mason's lead leg, followed by a controlled takedown that brought him firmly to the mat. The room froze. Mason's flushed face revealed disbelief and grudging respect. He struggled to mask the admiration growing in his eyes, the realization that he'd underestimated her. Coach Ortega stepped forward, raising his voice just enough to break the silence. Enough. That's enough. The black belts looked at Ava anew. No longer a punchline. She was now a presence to reckon with, a force defined by quiet strength and skill. The tension broke when Mason finally spoke, voice low but sincere. You're better than I thought. Ava nodded once, expression calm, unreadable. Lynn approached, resting a steady hand on Ava's shoulder. You've earned their respect. The gym was no longer a place of mockery. It had become a proving ground, one where quiet resilience spoke louder than words. The atmosphere in the gym had shifted once more. Gone were the mocking whispers and the sly smirks that had followed Ava since she first stepped onto the mat. Now, a quiet tension hung in the air, a mixture of anticipation and newfound respect that none of the black belts could fully admit aloud, but all felt deeply. Coach Ortega cleared his throat, stepping forward to break the silence. His voice was steady, authoritative. Alright, last round. This one's on me. Let's see real focus, control, and discipline. The black belts rearranged themselves around the mat, eyes flicking to Ava as she took her place in the center. Her GI was still too large, her belt tied loosely around her waist, sleeves bunching at the wrists. But the small frame that had once seemed so vulnerable now emanated an unmistakable presence. Calm, measured, unshakable. Mason approached first, his usual swagger tempered by something new, caution. He wiped his hands on his pants, squared his shoulders, and gave Ava a curt nod. It was a silent truce, an acknowledgement that this was no longer a contest of ego. They bowed. The whistle pierced the air, signaling the start. Mason moved with practiced aggression, launching a quick, precise combination, jab, cross, followed by a low kick. But Ava responded like flowing water, slipping and sliding around his attacks with minimal effort. Her movements weren't flashy or exaggerated. They were deliberate and efficient, conserving energy while maintaining perfect control. Mason grew more aggressive, stepping forward with a takedown attempt. He surged, pushing with all his strength. But Ava anticipated perfectly. Her center of gravity shifted. She grounded herself firmly. Using Mason's momentum against him, she guided him gently but unmistakably to the mat. No force beyond what was necessary. No flourish, just precision. The gym fell into a heavy silence. Mason lay on the mat, eyes wide with something new, respect. Coach Lin stepped forward, voice soft but firm. Enough. No one moved. No one spoke. The realization settled in like a slow dawn. Ava lowered her gaze slightly, not in submission, but with quiet dignity. She had done more than prove her skill. She had reclaimed her honor, through restraint, mastery, and presence. Mason extended a hand, helping her up with a subtle nod of acknowledgement. The gym had transformed from a place of mockery to one of earned respect. And Ava, once overlooked and underestimated, stood firmly in her rightful place. The gym had descended into a heavy silence, an expectant pause that stretched taut between every breath. This was not the polite quiet that fills the space while others speak, but something thicker, almost sacred. Everyone waited, eyes fixed on Ava standing alone in the center of the mat. The overhead lights cast long shadows, framing her small figure like a statue carved from calm itself. The black belts, coaches, and students alike were caught in the moment, the slow realization that this was more than just a sparring session. This was a reckoning. Mason stepped forward. His usual swagger and cocky grin were gone. In their place was a wary respect that he struggled to mask. He wiped sweat from his forehead and met Ava's steady gaze. "All right," he said quietly, voice low and serious. "Show me again." Ava simply nodded. No words. No provocation. She didn't need to speak. Her presence alone was a quiet command. The whistle blew sharply through the room. Mason struck first, measured and purposeful. Jab, cross, low kick, each attack deliberate, testing the edges of Ava's defense. But she was more than defense. She was fluid and precise, flowing around his moves like water adapting to every obstacle. The crowd leaned in, tension building with every shift in weight and angle. And then, the subtle moment came. Ava's eyes flicked downward for just a heartbeat, calculating. With the grace of someone who had done this thousands of times, she slipped behind Mason's guard. It was a movement so smooth, so seamless, it looked effortless. Mason found himself gently but decisively taken to the mat, controlled and quiet. No slam, no harshness. Just the undeniable proof of mastery. The gym gasped collectively, not in shock, but in awe. Coach Ortega stepped forward, his voice calm but charged with meaning. "She's the real deal. Marcus Kessler's daughter carries that legacy in every move." Lynn nodded solemnly, her eyes never leaving Ava. "She doesn't need to prove it. We all see it now." Ava bowed deeply, not to boast, but to honor. First to Mason, then to the crowd that had watched her rise from overlooked to undeniable. The silence that followed was not empty. It was reverence. Her quiet strength had spoken louder than words ever could. She had claimed her place, her legacy, and the room had finally seen. The gym was quiet now, but the atmosphere had shifted profoundly. What had once been a place buzzing with mockery and dismissal had transformed into a chamber of reverence and unspoken respect. Ava stood motionless, breathing calm and steady, a subtle, almost imperceptible smile touching the corners of her lips, a smile born not of triumph, but of quiet dignity. Mason slowly rose from the mat, the fire of arrogance replaced by a sober humility. His eyes locked onto Ava's, no longer with contempt or challenge, but with deep, genuine understanding. Around him, others mirrored the shift. Hardened faces softened, skeptical gazes turned to admiration. The room collectively absorbed the revelation. This was no ordinary student. Coach Ortega stepped forward, his voice low and steady, carrying the weight of concession. I underestimated her. We all did. His words rippled across the room, shattering the tension like a stone breaking still water. For once, the coach's pride was laid bare, open and honest. Lynn, standing beside him, nodded solemnly. Her gaze remained fixed on Ava, as if recognizing something ancient and profound. It's more than skill, Lynn said quietly. It's discipline, resilience, the legacy of a warrior passed down in silence and sacrifice. Soft whispers began to spread throughout the gym, tentative at first, but growing in confidence. She's Marcus Kessler's daughter. That explains everything. No wonder she moves with such precision. These murmurs were not merely about heritage, but about acknowledging the heavy burden Ava carried, the weight of loss, of sacrifice, and of an unyielding, silent strength. Ava's eyes scanned the crowd. She saw faces filled with apology, others with awe, and some with a newfound respect that didn't need words. She didn't seek their approval, yet the quiet recognition felt like a balm to wounds she had long hidden beneath layers of solitude and discipline. Peeking from beneath her GI sleeve was a small, faded patch, an olive drab insignia, worn and frayed, yet resolute. A quiet emblem, yet to those who understood, it spoke volumes, a symbol of legacy, honor, and unspoken history. Coach Ortega stepped closer, his tone gentle yet sincere. You don't owe us anything, but you've earned everything here. Ava inclined her head in acknowledgement. The long road of being overlooked, doubted, and underestimated had reached a pivotal moment. No cheers erupted. No loud proclamations followed. Only the silent, collective acknowledgement of a truth that no one could deny. The truth of a warrior. The gym held its breath as the final round began. The air was thick with anticipation, but no one spoke. Ava stood at the center of the mat, steady and calm, an unyielding presence in a room that had, just moments ago, been filled with doubt and dismissal. Mason approached with measured steps, his earlier arrogance tempered by a dawning respect. He looked at Ava not as a rival to be mocked, but as an opponent worthy of his full attention. Let's finish this, he said quietly, his voice steady but sincere. Ava nodded, her expression serene. There was no need for words. This was not about proving anything anymore. It was about honoring a legacy, a journey forged through years of quiet discipline and sacrifice. The whistle blew, slicing through the silence. Mason moved first, launching a precise, controlled combination, jab, cross, followed by a swift low kick. Ava responded with fluid grace, every motion deliberate, conserving energy while maintaining impeccable balance. Her counters were efficient. No wasted movement, no showmanship, just pure, refined skill. The crowd watched, utterly captivated. The tension wove a silent thread through the room, connecting every person present. Then, in a moment so subtle it almost went unnoticed, Ava shifted. Not with brute force, but with the gentle precision of water slipping through cracks. Her hand found Mason's wrist, guiding it with calm authority. She pivoted her hips, leveraging his momentum against him. Mason's balance faltered. She did not push or pull. She redirected. With controlled ease, Mason found himself on the mat again, completely under her control, without resistance or struggle. The gym exhaled in unison. Coach Ortega stepped forward, a rare smile breaking across his face. That's discipline. That's mastery. Lynn's eyes shone with quiet pride. That's the strength of someone who carries a legacy lived in silence and resilience. Ava reached down and helped Mason to his feet. Their eyes met. A silent exchange of respect, a bond forged through shared understanding rather than words. No cheers erupted. No grand declarations followed. Only the weight of truth hanging heavy in the air. And in that stillness, Ava reclaimed everything: her honor, her dignity, and the legacy passed down through quiet strength and unwavering resolve. The gym remained enveloped in a profound stillness, the kind of silence that speaks louder than any shout or cheer. Ava stood quietly at the center of the mat, her posture relaxed but resolute. There was no need for grand gestures or dramatic proclamations. Her presence alone conveyed a lifetime of stories, sacrifices, and unyielding strength. Every breath she took carried the weight of her journey. Around her, the black belts and instructors exchanged knowing glances, an unspoken understanding passing between them. The boy who had once sneered and mocked now lowered his eyes in respect. The murmurs of ridicule that once rippled through the room had been replaced by hushed whispers of admiration. Each person there recognized the transformation, not just in Ava, but within themselves. Coach Ortega stepped forward, his voice calm and sincere. What you've witnessed today isn't merely skill. It's legacy, a strength forged through sacrifice, perseverance, and quiet resilience. Lynn nodded in agreement, her gaze steady as she looked toward Ava. True power often comes in silence. It's carried deep within those who have faced hardship and remained unbroken. Ava began gathering her belongings slowly and deliberately. As she adjusted her GI, the worn olive drab patch on her sleeve caught the light, a subtle emblem of honor, history, and the countless untold stories behind every movement she made. It was a reminder that strength was not always flashy or loud, but enduring and true. She moved toward the gym's exit with steady, measured steps, her demeanor calm and composed. There was no dramatic farewell, no overt celebration. Instead, she carried with her the quiet confidence of someone who understands her own worth without needing to proclaim it. Those who had watched her rise that day had changed too. The gym itself had become a different place, a space where respect was earned through discipline and dignity, not empty bravado or superficial gestures. As Ava walked out into the fading light of the afternoon, she carried not just the legacy of her father, Marcus Kessler, but her own. A legacy built on silent strength, unwavering resolve, and the hard-earned respect that comes only from truth. And in that silence, she found her power. The gym had settled into a quiet hush, but the silence was far from empty. It was thick with a profound sense of recognition, an unspoken acknowledgement that transcended words. Ava stood there, calm and composed, a figure of quiet strength who needed no grand declarations or applause. Her presence alone commanded respect. The older students whispered among themselves, their voices low but filled with admiration. That's the kind of skill that comes only with real experience, one murmured. She carries more than just technique. She carries history, discipline, and sacrifice. Mason lingered near the edge of the mat, no longer the brash, cocky opponent who had challenged her earlier. His stance was softer now, humbled by the truth he'd witnessed. He gave a slow, deliberate nod toward Ava, a silent salute acknowledging her mastery, her legacy. Coach Ortega stepped forward, the usual sternness softened by a rare tenderness in his eyes. "You don't just fight with your body," he said quietly, his voice filled with respect. "You fight with your mind, your heart, and the weight of your history. That's what sets you apart." Lynn moved beside him and extended her steady hand to Ava. "It's rare to see that kind of depth in someone so young," she said, her voice gentle but certain. "You've honored not only your father's memory, but the spirit of all those who came before you. That strength runs deep." Ava accepted Lynn's hand, her gaze steady and humble. She said nothing, words were unnecessary. Her presence, her resilience, and the quiet dignity she carried spoke volumes. As the gym slowly began to empty, Ava gathered her things. She paused at the door, glancing back at the place that had challenged her, tested her, and finally seen her for who she truly was. Outside, the sun was dipping low, casting long golden shadows across the pavement. The fading light mirrored the quiet calm inside her, a calm born not of victory or applause, but of being truly seen, not just as a girl or a student, but as a warrior. For the first time, Ava felt it, an unshakable sense of belonging, a deep knowing that the path ahead, though uncertain and difficult, was hers to walk. And she would walk it with quiet strength, dignity, and honor. The gym had slowly emptied. The once bustling space now carried only the soft hum of the overhead fluorescent lights, their steady buzz filling the room like a gentle reminder of time passing. Ava moved with a calm deliberation, gathering her belongings in silence. There was no rush, no need to hurry away from the place that had tested her, challenged her, and ultimately recognized her. Her fingers traced the edges of the olive drab patch sewn into the sleeve of her GI, a small but sacred emblem, worn and faded from countless washes and years of quiet use. To others, it might seem like just another patch, but to Ava, it was a symbol of a legacy far greater than herself. It represented sacrifice, endurance, and the stories of those who had come before her, stories she carried quietly within her. As she paused near the exit, her gaze swept over the familiar surroundings, the worn mats, the faded posters of martial arts legends, the scattered equipment that bore silent witness to countless hours of training. The faces still lingering, some in subdued conversation, others lost in reflection, held a new respect. What had once been a place of judgment and dismissal had become, in these past hours, a ground of honor. A soft murmur floated across the room, voices blending into a low chorus of acknowledgement. There were no cheers, no applause, just the quiet, honest sound of respect, muted but deeply felt. Lynn appeared beside her without a word, standing tall and steady, embodying the same composed silence that now surrounded them both. After a moment, she spoke softly, her voice gentle but firm. "You did what few can," Lynn said. "Not just winning a fight, but winning their hearts and their respect." Ava offered a small nod, her eyes reflecting a complex mix of emotions, relief, pride, and something far deeper, a quiet understanding that this moment was not the end, but a new beginning. She looked out the door to the fading light outside, where the evening sun painted the sky in warm, gentle hues of gold and amber. The world outside seemed to echo the calm inside her, a peaceful transition from day into night. The path ahead remained uncertain. Challenges still awaited, both in the gym and beyond. But for the first time in a long while, Ava felt something shift inside her, a quiet strength, an unshakable foundation built not on boastful words or loud declarations, but on presence, truth, and dignity reclaimed. She stepped out into the evening air with steady purpose, her steps sure and unhurried. The weight she had carried for so long, of doubt, dismissal, and the invisible burdens of legacy, felt lighter now, more manageable. This was her journey, and she would walk it with the same quiet resolve that had carried her this far. No fanfare, no spectacle, just the enduring power of silent strength. The evening air was cool and still, wrapping around Ava like a comforting cloak as she stepped out of the gym's fading light into the calm embrace of the city night. The sounds of distant traffic, murmured conversations, and the occasional bark of a dog filled the quiet streets. It was a world that seemed far removed from the tension and skepticism she had endured just hours earlier. Yet, as Ava walked steadily down the sidewalk, her footsteps light but purposeful, she felt the weight she carried, both physical and intangible, begin to shift. The burden of doubt, the sting of dismissal, and the invisible chains of expectation were loosening. In their place, a quiet clarity had taken root deep inside her, a calm conviction born of hard-earned truth. Her thoughts drifted, as they often did, to her father, Marcus Kessler, a man whose legacy wasn't written in headlines or accolades, but etched quietly into the lives he touched and the battles he fought. Marcus had been a soldier, a warrior who bore scars, both seen and unseen, with dignity and silence. Ava hadn't just inherited his skills or his name. She had inherited his spirit, a spirit defined by resilience, honor, and an unbreakable will. She reached up, fingers brushing the cold metal of the dog tags tucked beneath her GI. They hung close to her heart, small and unassuming, yet heavy with meaning. Those dog tags were more than just identifiers. They were a reminder of sacrifice, of family, and of a lineage she was bound to uphold. The cool steel against her skin was a tether to a past she revered and a future she was determined to shape. Looking up, Ava's eyes met the vast expanse of the night sky. Stars twinkled faintly, scattered like distant beacons across the black canvas. In that quiet moment, she understood something profound. Legacy was not merely about what had been passed down. It was about what was lived in the present. It was about choices, actions, and the courage to carry forward the torch, no matter the obstacles. The gym, the confrontations, the doubts. They were merely the opening chapters in a story still unfolding. A story that belonged to her. Ahead lay an unwritten path, a future filled with challenges and opportunities yet to be faced. Ava knew the road would be long, often lonely, and sometimes painful. But she was ready. Ready to walk it with the quiet strength that had brought her this far, the honor that had sustained her, and the unwavering resolve that defined who she was. As she continued down the street, the city lights flickered softly, casting long shadows that stretched and danced with the night breeze. Every step she took was a statement, not one shouted from rooftops, but one spoken firmly in the language of presence and integrity. She was no longer just the girl doubted and underestimated. She was a warrior in her own right, one who carried a legacy not as a burden, but as a beacon. And with each breath, each stride, Ava embraced that truth. The legacy lived on. The dawn crept over the city skyline, casting long, gentle beams of light across the rooftops and into the quiet streets below. Ava stood alone on the roof of her apartment building, the cool morning breeze tugging at the edges of her GI and playing softly through her hair. Her posture was steady and grounded, her breathing calm and measured. In the stillness of the early hour, she seemed like a figure carved from silence itself, resilient, composed, unyielding. The trials she had faced in the gym, the jeers, the doubt, the whispered underestimations, felt like distant echoes now, memories of a battle long fought but far from forgotten. Those moments were just the surface of a deeper journey, one marked by countless hours of discipline and sacrifice. Late nights spent perfecting techniques, early mornings rising before dawn to train. The physical pain endured in silence, the emotional weight borne without complaint. Each step of the path had been forged in quiet determination. But in all that struggle, Ava had discovered a profound truth. Her strength was not measured by applause or fleeting recognition. It was found in the steady flame burning deep within, a flame kindled by legacy, by love, and by an unbreakable will to carry forward what had been entrusted to her. Her fingers drifted to the dog tags resting beneath her shirt, cool, familiar, and worn smooth by years of touch. They were more than mere metal. They were a tangible connection to her father, Marcus Kessler, and to a family history steeped in courage and sacrifice. Those dog tags represented the quiet weight of honor and the relentless spirit that Ava now carried on her own shoulders. As the city slowly awakened beneath her, cars humming to life, distant voices rising, the first birds taking flight, Ava felt a serene detachment from the noise of the world. She was anchored instead in the clarity of her purpose, the calm certainty that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. She had reclaimed far more than respect within the walls of the gym. She had reclaimed her dignity, her narrative, and the power to define her own story. No longer just a shadow behind her father's legacy, she was a force in her own right. With a soft, almost imperceptible smile, Ava turned away from the edge of the rooftop. The sun was climbing higher now, spilling golden light across the city and illuminating the path ahead. Her journey was far from over. Challenges would come, as they always did. Obstacles would test her resolve. But Ava was ready. She would face the future with the quiet strength that had carried her through the darkest hours, the honor that bound her to those who came before, and the unwavering resolve that would lead her forward. Her legacy was no longer just inherited. It was hers to shape, hers to carry, and hers to define. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive tactical stories.